the parts of our lives that we have control over that affect our heart rate, and they also affect our time and how well we do. There's your sleep, your nutrition, your emotional health, and your physical activity. They know no language barriers, they know no cultural barriers. They're all ingrained in us. And I'm going to give you some kind of technical words. I don't expect you to remember the technical words, but I hope you'll understand a little better how our bodies and our minds are interconnected, and there's some things that we can do positively for our bodies that will help our minds and give you kind of a little perspective of time. Biochemicals are in your brains. Sometimes we have more of them. We have more cortisol when we're stressed out, when we're worried about that time. But there's 4 of them. One of them is called serotonin, and it's kind of like a friendly police officer in your brain. It regulates your responses, and it helps you curb cravings. Dopamine is the second one, and it's kind of like your cheerleader. It gives you good energy and rewards you when you do your best. Leptin, I kind of think of it as my mom. It kind of oversees me, and it takes care of my energy intake and expenditure. So if I need to go out and play because I've got too much energy, leptin says, get out the door. And if your brain doesn't have enough energy in it, it says, you got to eat because your brain needs some more food. Finally is cortisol, and cortisol is kind of like a lawyer. You know, a lawyer, when you need one, you really need one. But if you don't need one, you want to stay away from cortisol. And time, especially if you're coming from a place that being on time is not important, and you come to a place where time is important, it's going to raise your cortisol, and that is going to kind of play with your brain, which plays with your body and doesn't make you do as well as you could. These biochemicals, they kind of sit in the back of your brain, and depending upon how much of them that you have, may be how you react to the same situation. For instance, you're driving down the street, there's a light in front of you, and you really kind of need to get through that light because you got some time thing going on that you need to get to. But grandma's driving in front of you, and she's just putzing along, and so because grandma's going so slowly, you get to the light and it's red. Well, if you've got too much cortisol in your brain at that time, you're probably going to hit the horn, scream, maybe make a few gestures, I don't know, but you're not going to be very happy because that cortisol is making you react in that way. But if you've just come from exercising, so your serotonin and your dopamine are kind of high, you might breathe, see the beautiful flowers, have a nice conversation when you finally get to where you go. So it's not the situation, it's how you react to that situation, and you react differently because of the biochemicals that are in your brain. So let's look at some of our health behaviors and how they affect those biochemicals. The biggest one that I can talk about is sleep. Sleep balances all 4 of your biochemicals. It lowers your cortisol, and it replenishes your leptin, your serotonin, and your dopamine. If you have a test to study for or a paper due, and you decide, I'm gonna throw an all-nighter, I'm just not gonna go to sleep. What you're going to do is you're going to raise your cortisol even more, and you're going to deplete the other 3, which puts your body and your brain even more out of whack than when it was. And the other thing that sleep does is sleep actually ingrains what you have been trying to learn in your brain. So if instead of pulling that all-nighter, you go to bed at your regular time, okay, I'll give you an hour or 2 less, maybe if you've got this big test, but you're going to get regular sleep. You're going to turn that cell phone off so you don't have that screen, or turn that computer off. No caffeine, no alcohol. You get a good night's sleep. You wake up in the morning, maybe a little early, review those top 3 things that you really think you're struggling with. You're going to do better on that test, or that paper is going to be more well written, because sleep is helping you control those biochemicals in your brain. Physical activity. When we are physically active, our serotonin and our dopamine rise, and our cortisol goes down all at the same time. And if you want to exercise, you need to have more dopamine and leptin in your brain. And what helps us get dopamine and leptin? Well, that's sleep and being happy or your mood. So can you see that these are all interconnected? If we're high on top 3 and low on cortisol, our life kind of goes along and we learn much better. When serotonin rises, we feel calmer, we're more upbeat. You may have heard we talk about a runner's high. It's really true. We have more serotonin and more dopamine in our bodies, and so we feel better about ourselves. If we feel better about ourselves, that means that cortisol is down and the dopamine is up. That means and leptin is up. That means we're in better control. The foods that we eat can boost both serotonin and dopamine production, especially if they're good foods, fresh fruits and vegetables, some proteins, some complex carbohydrates. Those are going to raise our dopamine and serotonin production. Alcohol, fatty foods, processed foods, sugar, those are going to deplete your serotonin and dopamine. Finally, being happy or our mood increases our serotonin, where being in a bad mood increases our cortisol, that bad guy. If we can stay happy by having good friendships, being able to talk to people, thinking positively, you know, if you have a bad thought, if you can erase that bad thought and say, well, this is happening, but I'm so grateful for my friends, or for the beautiful day, or for the fact that I'm here and I'm learning. That will help us boost our mood.
Here in America, you hear this a lot, and that is time is money. Have you heard that before?
Yeah.
Time is money. That's kind of a cultural thing that we have. That time is something we spend, it's a resource. We can spend it, or we can save it, but we don't want to waste it. I think as students, one thing you might want to think about is your professors, because you're going to be interacting with professors on your campuses. And the best way to impress your professor is arrive at class on time, or before. If you arrive right at 9 o'clock for a 9 o'clock class, you haven't been able to open up your notebook and get your paper out and get your pen out and be ready. So as a professor, you come in, you take your roll, you say, okay, let's start with the lecture. And then all of a sudden, students start taking out their stuff and getting ready. And that is not real impressive to professors. The ones who really do well are prepared, have their stuff out, ready, go. You should get to know all of your professors personally. Go to their offices and talk to them. We all have office hours. Some of them say by appointment. Great, make an appointment. Whether it's something you want to discuss about your class period, something going on in your life, or even better, just to get to know them. How impressed am I when somebody comes to my office makes an appointment, arrives on time, and I say, what can I help you with? And they say, I just wanted to meet you. I'm from wherever you're from, and I'm in your class, and I'm really enjoying your class, etc. And it's very, very, very impressive to a professor that the student took their time to come visit me. This is my calendar, okay? A lot of other people really know how to do the Google calendars. Everybody has it. And at Texas Tech, we have Microsoft, whatever it is. Yeah. And so they'll say, oh, I see you're free at 2 o'clock because there's nothing on your calendar. And they'll make an appointment with me without my permission, right? Because there is nothing on my calendar, because this is my calendar. So it doesn't matter if you're a Luddite and do it this way, or if you do it electronically, but keeping your calendar is the most important thing. Northern Europeans and Americans are very task-oriented. So what we do is take the most important task and then work down to the least important task.
How we spend our time tells people what's important to us. If you're in a relationship and you don't spend a lot of time with that person, aren't you telling that person, well, you're not that important to me? Isn't that true? It's what our thoughts and our time, what we do with those two things, tell people what's important to us. If education's important to you, if work's important to you, you spend your time with those things. And in America, time to us is important. When people are on time, they're telling us, well, I'm important to you. In Belize, when I said, hey, I'll meet you at 10 o'clock, and they didn't show up until 12 o'clock, they were telling me that I'm not important. That's not true to them, because time's different. When you go to your classes and they give you a deadline or a due date, write it down. Then back up from there and say, I have this much time to accomplish this. Because what happens to us normally is that I have a due date. When do you normally do it? The night before, right? And then we lose sleep.
This is
right?
universal.
That's Americans too. If I have a project and it's due Thursday, Wednesday night I'm going, I wake up, maybe I have, my head's off the bed, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got it. And then I'm worried, my cortisol rises. I don't do it very well because I didn't manage my time. There's a guy named Stephen Covey who says, start with the end in mind. What do I need to accomplish? How much time do I have to accomplish it? And I break my time up into increments. Stephen Covey says 7 principles of highly effective people. One of them is know your deadlines, know your due dates, back your time up. Because I was a student once too. Projects on Thursday, Wednesday I'm going to spend all day doing it instead of breaking it up into increments where it lowers my cortisol. My dopamine and my serotonin go up. I feel much better. My heart rate comes down, and I live to be 120 years old.
I think also when you do that planning, planning some parts of your life that are the fun and enjoyable.
Absolutely.
Planning a time with your friend, planning a time for exercise. I think making it a regular time where you kind of look at your week. You've already got those deadlines in there. You can plan when you're going to work on things, but you can also plan some things that make you happy, give you some good parts to your life, increase that serotonin and decrease that cortisol so you'll be able to get through.
In Belize, I taught school to 6th and 7th graders. One of the phrases I would say almost every day is luck favors the prepared. And I would tell my students, it's not luck, it's preparation. There's a word that we use called margin. You build in margin, meaning if I need to be at an appointment at 10 o'clock, I know it takes me 15 minutes to get there. I think, well, maybe there's traffic. Do I leave 15 minutes before, or do I leave 20 minutes or 25 minutes? Because we're all bad about this. It takes me 15 minutes to go. When do I leave? 15 minutes on the dot. Traffic happens and you're like, oh, I'm going to be late. But building in margin helps eliminate many of those problems. But if it happens and you can't, there's nothing you can do to negotiate the time, always let the person know. Americans, for us, that's just saying, hey, I'm sorry I'm going to be late. You're honoring my time by saying, I'm sorry that I'm going to be a little late. I don't use that all the time.
I wanted to mention one thing about dinner, too. If you're ever invited to somebody's house for dinner, okay, we could talk about fashionably late. Have you heard that expression? I'm fashionably late. Well, I think, my opinion, is for dinner at someone's house, fashionably late would be 5 minutes, okay?
Maybe 15. Maybe 15.
My rule is, if it's just a small dinner party, like if it's my husband and me with another couple,
Right.
I would do 5. But if it's a party, like with a bunch of people, 15, because other people would arrive earlier.
That's one time in America it's rude to show up early. Because if dinner's at 6:30 and you show up at 6 o'clock, they may still be getting dressed. I think the last thing that would be interesting is that when we were in these other countries, accepting their way they dealt with time is part of being in that culture. This is important. Because if I tried to dictate American time in Belize, they would look at me as I'm crazy. Hey, the boat said it was going to be here at 11 o'clock. Why isn't the boat done? I think it all sitting under the boat. Why is it? They think I was a nut. Because in Belize, they're like, it's okay, man. It's chill. It's just chill. And so they just lay back and it's okay. So I learned to just go, okay, I'll just wait. I'll wait. Here's the opposite, though. Is when you're in America, we expect people to be on time. So when you're not, we think you're crazy. It's honoring that culture is very important. I had to honor that culture. I was going to look like I'm a lunatic. Here, if you don't honor the culture of time here, you're looked upon as rude.